Welcome everybody to Beers with Bill. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce a kickoff alumni, Taylor Robertson. Taylor, welcome to Beers with Bill.
Thank you for having me, Bill. I'm very excited to be here. I see some familiar faces and I'm excited to share with the rest of you.
That's good. So just for those of you who joined us, I'm starting with Après-Vu tonight. This is a fermented with Saison yeast. It's a mild sour, the style of beer that Taylor likes to drink, which is what we were trying to do to make sure there was at least a couple of beers. The Counterpoint beers tonight, Graham fortunately can't join us, so you're going to get me to introduce it. So done on apricots, a bright flavor of apricots. Taylor, I'm curious, why young women in STEM?
Well, I can answer this from, I guess, kind of two perspectives. My own personal experience as well as kind of a more general, broad-based answer. For my own personal experience, I am a woman in STEM. I'm excited about my field, love my field, was excited to meet many new women when I entered into it. I just graduated from Waterloo, actually. So throughout my time there, I was involved in their co-op program. I got the opportunity to serve on 6 different work terms as a engineering intern, various different roles. And out of the 6 jobs that I held, I was oftentimes the only woman in the engineering department. And even at a couple companies, I was the only woman in the entire company, which was a very different experience, something I wasn't expecting. Going into it was expecting there to be more women. I thought there was more progress that had happened. And I think there need to be more women in the workplace. Being the only woman in a workplace, there's definitely that lack of support. You don't have female peers to lean on, which is something that's very important. To answer from a more general perspective, just going from maybe a little bit outdated data, but still very relevant to today's world. From Stats Canada, 2011, only 39% of grads with STEM degrees were women. That's less than 50% of all of the STEM degrees counting as women. Of those 39% that were women, only 20% of them graduated in engineering and only 30% of them in math. So all of these fields, there's very little representation from women. Another place to look at too, something called Program for International Student Assessment looks at math scores in children who are 15 years old. Out of those rankings, women only, I guess, 23% of women from the top highest 3 scores of that assessment even went on to pursue STEM, compared to 39% of men who were ranked in the lowest 3 tiers went on to pursue STEM fields. So there's this wide open gap and discrepancy between men and women represented in STEM fields today. It is changing, but it's something that still needs a push. So that's why it's very important to me and should be very important to anyone in the workplace or who works in a STEM field. So
I'm intrigued because you and I chatted last night and you had a really heavy schedule going through high school because you actually were dancing with the Calgary Ballet, right?
I danced with the professional training program for Alberta Ballet. Yeah.
And that requires a heavy time commitment on a daily basis.
Yeah, it does. I was dancing, training 6 days a week. I would train until 10 a.m. every morning, show up to school late, leave school early to go back and train again for another hour or two, and was training 4 or 5 hours on Saturdays, as well as a month of every summer I trained from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. So definitely a lot of my time went into dance growing up.
It must have been hard to stop doing that.
Sorry?
It must have been hard to stop doing that.
Yeah, so Actually, what happened was my dance ended up prioritizing dance over education. They wanted to integrate school into the dance program, so I would do all of my academics on site at the school, um, which for me was a sacrifice in education. I've always loved to learn. I Instead of playing house when I was little, I would play school. I've loved learning, and it's been something that is very important to me. So when this change got made, to me, not having a solid academic background to fall onto, if I got hurt or anything went wrong and I didn't have that career in dance, was just not worth it to me. So I had to make a very tough decision at a very young age to decide to stop and instead go all in with my academics.
So I'm curious because usually it's in your early teenage years that young women lose the interest in science and math. How did you keep your enthusiasm through all of that for
So
those?
yeah, I had a couple very inspiring teachers. I was fortunate enough in high school to attend two schools. I went to regular high school and I was able to attend classes at, it was called the Career and Technology Center, and they offered some trades sort of programs, like there was welding, automotive, and they also offered an engineering class. So in high school, I was good in math and science, thought engineering was something that could be of interest. And so I was able to take up this engineering program in high school. And it was taught by a woman who graduated from chemical engineering from the University of Queens, Queens University. And she was very inspiring in terms of encouraging me to follow that path, get excited about math, science, robotics, engineering in general. And I that was definitely a big spark throughout my teenage years.
So you mentioned it was really hard being the only female in engineering departments or even in the whole organization. Important mostly because of a lack of having a mentor.
Yeah.
Who have you had for a mentor?
So I couldn't pin one person as a mentor. I'd say the most consistent one throughout my life has been my dad. He's constantly pushed me to do my best, aim higher, and that's definitely been something that has pushed me to accomplish all of these things in my life and try so many things in my life. So most consistently, my dad. Um, Very specific to engineering and STEM. My grade 9 teacher was the first person to point out, hey, you're really good at math. Maybe you should do something with it. When I was in grade 9, she pointed out and showed me this amazing program. It was for computer science for girls camp, actually run by the University of Waterloo, which was very cool. And she encouraged me to sign up for it, help me through all that process. And that was really my first exposure of STEM fields in general, stuff more than anything I'd see in a classroom, in terms of, in this case, computer science type courses and learnings. And again, yeah, she was the one who pointed out, hey, you're good at math. Like, why don't you pursue this? And yeah, and again, just it being another female in STEM was really inspiring. So
You have an admirable goal of developing ways to attract young women into STEM.
yeah.
I'm curious what we as members of the Kickoff Annex community can do to help you on this journey.
So I am looking currently to develop a program that is ongoing to encourage and expose young women to STEM fields. Essentially, what exists right now is there's camps, there's workshops, all of which are very short-term ventures, so to speak. Workshops are usually a day, camps are maybe a week or maybe a summer camp, but there's not much ongoing exposure besides what you would get in the classroom. That exposure that you get in the classroom is not uh, explaining all the different career options, all of these other fields that might not be talked about. And so I think that it's very important to have some sort of ongoing program where, especially women, for all of the reasons I said earlier, why it's important to get more women in STEM, to have an outlet where they can get exposure to all of these different fields, as well as hear from women who are in these fields, whether they're current females in STEM programs at whichever universities, or they're in industry. Even men in STEM fields who are supporters of getting more women involved and their perspectives of why they think it's important for more women to be in these programs. So currently, I have kind of put together a framework of what I want these programs to look like, and am now switching to the process of really making connections with school board, um, anyone interested in being a part of these programs to kind of get it up and running. So in terms of anything anyone could do to help me in this part of my progress so far would be any connections. I'm looking for connections, support in making this a reality. So whether that's connections within the school board, connections within universities, maybe above and beyond Waterloo, um, or even those who work in STEM fields currently and are interested in being a speaker, helping run any of the sessions, stuff like that. Yeah, reach out, contact me, and I would love to get you on board with helping make this a reality for sure. So, yeah.
You've got one person already in the chat line saying that she can help.
Beautiful.
Do you have a website or an app or?
I don't currently. I think in terms of where it, or the exposure will come from, will be advertised through teachers. A lot of times, like myself, there are brilliant young women sitting in math class or science class, and it's their teachers coming over to say, hey, this would be a wonderful thing for you to get involved in. So most of the exposure will be through teachers and the school board. I should also specify too that I'm looking to start out focusing on women in grade 9 and 10. Start small. Ideally, I would like to get this to grade 7 through 12, but I think right now focusing on grade 9, 10, those years where you're kind of making up your mind of what should I go into to university? You haven't quite started applying yet. And those critical years before you're, I guess, applying for university. So, yeah.
I'm going to take a brief commercial break here and go to the next beer. For those of you who have the beers, Wildflowers, which is a collaboration with a local band. The Mountain released the Wildflowers a few months ago. This is a beer brewed with hand-picked dandelions. I was curious why it was hand-picking dandelions. Now I know. Magnolias and lilacs, and subtle floral aromas, layered flavors, including sweetness from the dandelions and a dry finish. I like that. That's interesting. Taylor.
Yes.
Why Miss World Canada?
So this story starts quite a while ago. When I was 12, I got approached by a teacher at my elementary school who said, "You're in dance, you should do this, you would be great at it." At the time, that would have been for Miss Teenage Calgary. I'm originally from Calgary, for those that don't know me. And it was something that, since I was dancing so much, I did not have time to do, but I put it on my bucket list. And in more recent years, I thought it was something that I was just going to write off, never have time to do. But now that I have done school, I have some time. An ad to apply for it came up on my Facebook feed. So I took it as a sign and said, heck, let's give it a shot. So I applied. I looked a little more into it and what it involved. I saw that it involved starting up a social project. And I thought, if anything can come of this, the best I can do is leave that stage, being hopefully being able to be a role model for a young nerdy girl out there, to know that she can do whatever she wants, and also to use as a platform for encouraging young women to pursue STEM, along with the project that I'm choosing to pursue, which I have explained prior to our little intermission. So those are my main reasons, passions for choosing to do this. And now I'm really excited about it. I think that I can do okay, and leave leave the stage and audience better off. So
My mind skipped on my next question because the immediate response in my head was, in a little bit of a way, I'm still back in 1970 when Miss World Canada was Miss
yeah.
Universe and everything else, and highly sexualized. Whereas now I notice a social good. So the
Yeah.
emphasis is on doing good for community. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, I was also very much worried about the kind of assumptions people have about it. And even going into it, I was actually fairly nervous to tell people that I was entering, because people jump to those conclusions. But there is a huge, huge shift to do good with it. I will be starting very soon, uh, as part of my candidacy, fundraising for cardiac kids, as well as, like I mentioned, I have the social project. Um, all of the other candidates have also publicized what theirs are going to be and their ideas for theirs. And everyone's project is so impactful, for everything from uh, women who've been abused, to combating poverty, to women in STEM, to acting on climate change. All playing fields are covered in these projects. And like I said, I think a lot of good can come out of these. So
Who would you say is a role model for you?
um, in terms of, I guess, life, um, again, gonna play the dual role here, both mentor and role model. It would again still be my dad, um, just in terms of how he pushed himself to start his own company. He's been doing so for the last 20 some odd years now, and 25 years. And just that in itself has been inspiring. Um, and then again, my two female teachers who were both in STEM, my grade 9 math teacher and my engineering teacher, both of them just set the stage of always relaying their passion for the field, always encouraging students to try new projects. They've both connected me with young women who are in their classes now, when they have questions about what it's like to go into engineering as a young woman, and have just been huge advocates for women in STEM. So
I'm going to ask that difficult question.
okay.
And it's actually not that difficult, but
Okay.
the number of women that are in STEM fields now, the latest stats at university levels, particularly in math and science, is that almost in the graduate field, there are more women than there are men, which is a great change. What I'm curious about is, have you noticed if there's been a change in the attitude towards women? Are they more listened to and more respected now, or has that still got a ways to go?
In the classroom, definitely yes. Universities are trying a lot harder to include more women, to bring more women into these programs. In the workplace, no. I have had bosses who, me beside my male counterpart, would only look at my male counterpart and address him, give him direction, and not even look at me, even though we're same class, same program, same job title. Not a single glance. I've had other bosses who, whenever it was a two-person job that I would have to do, anyone who came to help me, they would just assume they were helping me to hang out with the only female in the company. And then whenever it was a simple task that I could do with my eyes closed, they would send someone over to help me because, oh, she can't do that by herself. She obviously needs help. So no, it has not changed. The workplace has a lot that needs to be worked on. That's not to say that every workplace is like this. I've heard my female colleagues have had experiences that have been wonderful. I've had experiences that have been wonderful as well. But it does still exist out there, and it is still a problem that needs to be addressed. So
I hear you. Remy was curious if it's just older men or is it awkwardly what's the word? Introverted, poorly socialized men.
The two experiences I just described were definitely not awkward men. One was an older white male, and the other was a younger guy who was not awkward. So all kind of realms there that it comes from and that I've seen it happen in.
So I'm going to switch it up a little bit and ask you, who's the artist on your playlist right now?
To answer that, it would be anything that my lovely partner Scott listens to. I usually follow his taste in music, and whatever he's listening to, it trickles my way. It's usually some artist that's never been heard of that I couldn't even list to you right now. And he's sitting over here laughing at me.
Yeah. Hi, Scott.
Hi, everyone.
But yeah.
Graham Hardy asks, he points out that we all have blind spots.
Yep.
What's the most common problem and solution that you would recommend in that type of a work environment?
The most common problem is that there aren't enough women there. The best solution for that is to hire more women and get more women in these workplaces. But with everything I said, there's obvious deterrents to why women don't want to be in these workplaces. I think one thing is bringing women into higher up positions in companies. There's always the trickle down of bureaucracy. If you have women in these high positions that are able to speak their opinions and be heard, those kind of changes are gonna, go throughout the company, and changes are gonna happen. So
you do raise an interesting point, because culture changes happen from the top down. They don't happen from the bottom up.
Yeah,
You know.
unfortunately.
No, unfortunately, they don't. It's the culture set by the CEO and senior management, and yes, there is a dearth of women in those roles.
Mhm.
Has been for some time.
Yeah.
Gonna go further back up. Graham did ask a question. He was wondering if you have noticed that there was uh, more interest in adding arts and turning STEM into STEAM.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I personally myself haven't noticed a change to include it. At least at Waterloo, the arts faculty was always very separate. But from my own personal experiences and being very immersed in the arts growing up, I know how important it is to include it. Essentially in dance, you're counting, you're doing math. In music, Scott and I were having a conversation earlier, you have to know how to do algebra basically to play the piano at a very high level. There's math in uh, painting, in all these different fields of arts. It's just as important. I think it should be included. I unfortunately haven't seen a push to include it. That could just be where I've been exposed to, but I do strongly agree that it should be changed to STEAM and that arts should fall into that bucket.
Graham's also curious as to, is there a way of creating a welcoming culture to foster growth in that area?
I think that one thing I've noticed in companies that have been very welcoming, open to women, etc., versus ones that aren't, um, have definitely had more open mindset to how their company runs in general. Um, Companies that have a more startup culture, companies that have a younger workforce or more diversity in general in their workforce versus ones that have a very strict hierarchy, uh, have a lot, or I guess a much larger, older workforce in them. I think just even starting from becoming more diverse, becoming more open to change in general is one way to be more open and welcoming to welcoming the change of having women in the workplace and change in the perspective that a woman's opinion matters in important decisions in the workplace.
From my coaching background, it's well documented that the more voices you bring to the table, the more opportunity as an organization you have to grow and become great.
Yes, I agree with that for sure.
I need to talk a little bit about Celebrating Sisters, which is the next beer that we're going to do taste from Counterpoint Brewing. This is a collaboration beer with the Indigenous, got to get it right, Indigenous Brew Crew and Ren Navarro and Graham at Counterpoint. And it was done to celebrate Indigenous women and raise awareness to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people. And the funds were going to the Native Women's Resource Center. This is done on foraged Canadian wild juniper berries. Zesty lemon on the nose is their descriptor, caramel and malt throughout with some earthiness on the finish, which was one of the reasons I chose to do the sours beforehand, because that earthiness does hang on there and linger. So, we had a long chat last night, and I'm curious because I have a question, and that is after all of this, what's next for Taylor?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I just graduated from the University of Waterloo. So I have my convocation coming up this weekend, which is very exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Given that I have just graduated, I will be starting a full-time position in July. I chose to take a little bit of time off to relax, de-stress from the stressful program that was engineering. I will be working as a software developer at a company called Brock Solutions. They're an automation integrator in Kitchener. So I'm very excited to take on that new opportunity. It'll be interesting not having to leave after 4 months. So like I do on co-op. So that'll be a change. Also, Miss World Canada, the first qualifiers are coming up, or I guess the first round is coming up in July 10th and 11th. So I will be the interim preparing for that. And then if all goes well, the full competition will be a week long in October. So more preparations for that there, as well as COVID has kind of given me the opportunity to take up new hobbies and whatnot. So enjoying some time to paint is one. I've been cooking a lot more, and I have been on the golf course more than I have ever been in a season so far this year. So enjoying golf. But yeah, that is what's next for me.
And I'm going to skip ahead. So what's your handicap?
Well, my league tells me it's a 14, but I sometimes don't believe that, and Scott sometimes doesn't believe that either. So
That's
but
fantastic. Do you have a favorite course you like to play on?
I actually just played at River's Edge for the first time last week. It's a course in Kitchener down by the Costco, and it's right on the Grand River. It's absolutely gorgeous. If anyone has not played there or is a golfer, I definitely recommend it. Otherwise, I grew up golfing at a course just outside Calgary called Carmony, and another stunning course that I would love to play at if only it wasn't COVID.
You've had an interesting last year and a half. You're the graduating class 2021, and that meant that you finished third year in COVID lockdown. Yep. You did your full fourth year in COVID lockdown. But on top of that, you were also one of the members of the GradCom, which was the people who put together all of the interesting things that happened during your graduating year for your graduation.
Yeah.
How did you stay grounded through all of this?
Some days I didn't, if I'm being completely honest, but I was very disappointed that my fourth year wasn't what I wanted it to be. I got elected as to be one of the chairs for the graduation committee not even 2 weeks before lockdown happened. So it was something that was very unexpected. Going into the role after realizing that I'd be in lockdown, that fourth year wouldn't be what I expected, I wanted to do everything in my power to make all of the important events that are, for those of you who are maybe not familiar with some of the engineering traditions, fourth year is some very, we'll say, culty events that happen, and students will wait their entire degrees for these events. So trying to recreate the magic that everyone's been looking forward to is definitely no easy feat. I wanted to, or I guess my team and I helped to transition these events to online in the best we could. And what kept me grounded was knowing that in this crazy world and in these times, I was doing the best that I could given the circumstances. And that was all I could do. And that was all that was within my power to do. And yeah, there are some students who were not happy still, but knowing that going into this, you're not going to please everyone and you can't change the pandemic. So what can you do? But do your best. So that's definitely what kept me grounded. And I had a lot of support from the rest of my team, and a bunch of students were very thankful that we even tried to give them these events. So that felt wonderful to hear that feedback.
Did I just hear a little bit of your dad in that? You do the best you can do?
Yep. 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 That's definitely comes from that.
Congratulations, Dad. You've raised a wonderful daughter. And I knew that almost from the first time she came into the bar and gave me a hard time.
Yep.
So tell me, what's been the hardest hurdle to overcome through COVID?
Honestly, being isolated. I am a very social person. I love interacting with people. I love being around people, and being cut off from the world, not having that interaction on a day-to-day basis, even if it's just passing by for lunch or in the hallway, a quick wave, you miss that social interaction. So just being okay with being alone all day essentially is definitely been a big hurdle. So finding things to do to keep me busy. Yeah.
I hear you on that.
Yeah.
What's been the best change for you because of COVID?
The best change has actually been moving. My partner, Scott, and I moved into a house in September. We're still just renting it, but because of COVID, we were in a situation where I'd be on phone calls with my work at the time, and a roommate would be on phone calls with work at the time. And there's just too many people stuck working in a house. And so we went our own ways, and just having our own space is such a nice feeling, especially in a pandemic. So, yeah, that's definitely been the best change.
Has COVID changed your view of the world?
Yeah, it definitely has. Most, I guess, mostly with how we view essential workers, I think people did not think twice about a cashier at a grocery store before this. They did not think twice about what the definition of essential services meant. And now that we've been in a pandemic for over a year, and these people have gone into work every single day, been paid not a whole lot, and be up against the virus every single day and possibly bringing that home to their family, they're a, they're very underappreciated. And I think that really got brought to light during the pandemic, and I think is something that needs to be carried forward after the pandemic, the appreciation for all of these incredible workers. So yeah, that's definitely changed my perspective a lot.
What do you do differently now because of COVID?
I think the biggest changes have been in like my day-to-day routine. I've switched workouts to being at home, which is interesting following YouTube videos to work out at home. I've been cooking a lot more and just doing more hobbies and finding that time that would otherwise have been spent going out with friends or doing a sport that was not in the house. So uh, finding new ways to allocate time, spend time, and make the most of it.
Remy posted a difficult question. I'm going to
Okay.
throw it at you. You
Okay.
can tackle it or not. It is your choice. Is it true that you see less women creating startups and getting into higher up positions because they tend to be more risk adverse?
Ooh. Yes and no. I'd say yes, in the sense that women women tend to be more organized than men. Uh, Looking through those numbers, looking through what this is going to cost them, um, definitely taking, and this is not everybody. I realize that, but yeah, seeing a large number in front of you can maybe make you think twice. So from that perspective, I can say yeah. Um, from a completely different perspective, no. There are women that are going out there and starting up their own companies, which is amazing. There are women trying their hardest and succeeding in some cases to be in these higher up positions. The company that I'm going to work for, actually, their CEO, or I guess president, is a female, which is incredible. So it is happening. I think another deterrent, like I said earlier on, is just this harsh environment that still exists in some of these fields. That is, maybe the world is scary. People are not nice sometimes, and you got to have thick skin going into it. So having the thick skin to take whatever crap you get and do your best to get to where you want to be at the end of the day.
Thank you, Taylor. I totally agree. All the powerful women that I have had to deal with in my life are more methodical and not less risk averse. They just think it through more than a guy will do.
Yeah.
Eric, I see you have your hand up. I will mute you if you step out of line.
It's Naomi.
It's Naomi this time.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Naomi.
I just want to say I have a hard time believing there's something in our biology that would make women less risk averse. And it's more to do with society teaching women not to take chances, because when we do take chances, we fail because of the misogyny of the patriarchal system. So, yeah.
That was beautiful. I am beautiful.
He's right.
Very
okay.
beautiful.
I get that one off.
Yes.
Thank you, Naomi.
That's my life.
Taylor.
Yes.
I gave you a chance to think about this last night. So what do you see that's new and exciting happening right now?
Oh, okay. Yes. One thing that is right in my face all the time, because I've been able to do it a lot, is I don't know how many people on this call are golfers, but there's a lot of young people who are out golfing, albeit it's because there's nothing else to do. But when I was growing up, I was embarrassed to tell people that I golfed, just because it was perceived to be a sport that generally an older group of people would play. And I always had a hard time finding, especially young women, to play golf with. So now seeing so many more young people out golfing is awesome. I'm very excited about that. Another thing that's really nice to see is a lot of people, with Zoom and video calls becoming such more prevalent in our day-to-day lives, are reconnecting with people who are far away and reviving old connections, people that they haven't seen in forever. And I think that's really, really great. I recently reconnected with an old friend, and we've been as close now since we reconnected as we were when we were kids. So seeing all these new connections or old connections get reignited is really, really wonderful. As well, people who do enjoy working remotely, having more control, flexibility with their schedule, I think is something that's really great. And I think for those who do want to continue working remotely, and that's something that works well for them, more companies being open to have that as an option in the future, I think that's great. And I think it's needed in the world. So I'm happy for all those people. I don't like working remotely, but for those that do and love it, I think it's so great to see that companies are being more open-minded about that.
Good. Yeah. I'm going to go to the last beer, and then I'm going to ask you a few more questions.
Okay.
Phantomed IPA, East Coast style, dry hopped with the African Queen hops from South Africa. Hazy, juicy, and deceivingly light on the nose, but full of punch, and finishes thick, fruity with a touch of spice. I'm looking forward to this. Have you always liked sour beers, Taylor?
From when I tried them, yes. I was very confused as to what a sour beer would taste like before I'd ever had one. But as soon as I tried it, it became my favorite. So yeah, it's my go-to. If there's a sour, that's what I'm having.
Should I dare ask you what you used to drink before sours?
Probably not. It's Canadian.
Yep. Nothing wrong. It's a clear, easy drinking beer. That's 80% of all beers in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. I got to get back to where I was on the other thing there. What book would I find on your nightstand right now?
Actually, probably one of the classics. Currently, either Catcher in the Rye or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. My partner and I, with COVID, have started our own mini book club, and we've decided to go back and reread some of the classics that you would normally get taught in high school, come at them from, I guess, a have been out in the world perspective, and see what we think of them now, and have been reading a couple chapters. We'll debate it. Yeah, so working through the classics currently.
I'm not sure I would agree that Catcher in the Rye and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy are the same level, even though I'm a sci-fi buff.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy came strongly recommended by Scott. So
Do not let that young man lead you down the garden path. What is your favorite craft beer bar, restaurant, or brewery in the KW area?
well, of course it was kickoff. I would be there at least once a week, some point after classes. Unfortunately, now with it closing, I have to find a new spot to go. In terms of breweries, though, definitely Counterpoint. So good job, Bill, on selecting them for tonight's beers. Bill ran during my time as GradCom tasting for our fourth year students. And one of the weeks we had done Counterpoint, and all of the beers from them, again, were phenomenal. Scott and I both loved them, so they're a favorite. They will be catering, I guess, are my convocation in terms of beer. So they're a very good brewery.
Someone has jumped in on the chat line. They say that Hitchhikers is better than Catcher in the Rye.
I'm sure Scott would agree. We haven't finished either of them yet, so we're still, there's still, I guess, endings to be solved.
If you could hang out with anybody for a day, who would that person be?
It would probably, gonna lump them into one person, but my grandma and grandpa, they both passed away when I was really young. Both of them were very, very incredible people. My grandpa was a surgeon, fought in World War II. My grandma was a nurse, and I think both of them would have some very good advice and life lessons that they could pass along to me. So it would be wonderful to hear that from them, and especially grown up and not a child, to be able to take that advice and apply it, because I think, yeah, like I said, it would be very valuable.
You took that down a path I never saw coming. That's fantastic.
Like
Yes.
celebrity or
No, there are many times I wish that I could have another conversation with my grandmother.
Yeah.
I never knew my grandfather. He died. They actually, the last picture of him alive, he's holding me in his hand, and literally I'm in his hand. He had big hands, and I was like 18 months old, and he passed away about 3 days after that picture. So I never even knew who he was. That's fantastic. I like that. Thank you. Can you share with us the best advice you've ever received?
Again, this is twofold. Be never say never, and nothing is forever. Never say never in that you can do whatever you want. If you say never, there's a chance it's going to come back in your life, and you can give it another shot. If something's not working out, it doesn't mean it's not going to work out for you in the future. Don't discount things before they've even happened, because life's too short to do that. So never say never. Nothing is forever, in that just because you have an awesome job that you love doesn't mean you're going to be there forever. So don't get too bummed out if it doesn't work out. If a relationship doesn't work out, move on, move to the next thing. Change is something that you can't prevent in your life. Everything is going to change at some point or another. So just keeping your mind open to that change for whenever it does come about and being okay with it. So, yeah.
I'm scared to ask the next question after that. That's very mature. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Not to grow up too fast. I spent most of my childhood probably pretending I was 5 years older than I was, and the gray hairs that I have started to get are not fun. If I could go back, I would enjoy every dance class. I would enjoy hanging out with my friends, not having responsibilities, not having to pay bills. It's not as fun as you think. So yeah, tell myself not to grow up too fast and just enjoy every last bit of it. So
I'm really intrigued because you being a dancer would have been a minimum 5 hours a day.
yep. Yep.
Would you have changed that at all?
My dance, no. I think what I got from it and the discipline that I got from it helped me a lot actually academically. As I had mentioned when I was discussing my dance, I would get to school late every day and leave early. So all the class that I missed, I would end up having to teach myself at the end of the day. And learning to teach myself was something that lended very well to having to try and teach myself stuff in university that I couldn't figure out. So in the long run, everything that I got out of that experience was very valuable. The friendships I made there, again, were very valuable. And the discipline to be 12, 14 years old and having to remember everything you learned in a 2-hour class and repeat it again without question the next day is, again, something that held me in good stead. So
I can't say it enough, Taylor. I'm impressed. I after the conversation last night, and I turned to my wife and I'm like, I am so excited to have Taylor on the show.
I'm excited to be here.
And I look at what you're trying to do, young women in STEM and that, and the stuff that you want and the support that you're looking for. But what I'm most curious about is, what does a success look like to you in an outcome for women, young women in STEM?
Well, I can throw a question back at you. What does a successful outcome for men in STEM look like? That should be the answer for women. To break it down though, success is when there's equal representation in the workforce in these fields. There's equal representation in the classroom. And when women in STEM does not need to be talked about separately from STEM. It's just STEM. There doesn't need to be a separate conversation. So until we reach that point, there's more work to be done.
I don't think I need to ask my last question. This is a perfect place to end. Taylor, thank you for being such a wonderful guest this evening. Fantastic story, wonderful outcome, and looking forward to the work that you're doing. I am so glad that you're a role model for younger women in STEM. Thank you for being part of this and
Thank you so
for
much
being
for
who
having
you are.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoy being able to share this with all of you. I do, from those who have cameras on, see a lot of men here. So hopefully you can also take what I said, digest what I said. I think it's important for everyone to hear this message. So thank you for being here. I hope you got to enjoy some wonderful beers as well, because heavy talks are always more exciting when you have a beer that tastes really good. Bill is a wonderful person, and like I said, I enjoy being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been a pleasure. Remind everybody next week, singer, songwriter, business owner, Eric Bolton will join us, and we'll be doing Beers from Jackass.